Hey everybody, it's Helen Hillix, licensed therapist and intuitive coach, and I am here today with Kelsey Aida. I'm so excited to talk to her about authentic happiness.
Yes.
I am so excited because I'm so tired of watching all of this BS about you can always be happy because you just tell yourself so, and positive thinking and everything. So we're going to dive deep into this topic. And let me tell you a little bit about Kelsey before we start. She is a next generation thought leader, and that really fits her. You know, people say that about themselves, and then they just tell you the same old crap you've heard over and over. But Kelsey really is a next generation thought leader who has taught thousands of people how to use their own power and win through her inspirational blog, her online courses, and her international retreats. And she's also the author of #ActuallyICan, The Art of Affirming Yourself to Greatness, Affirmations for Happiness, which we're going to talk about today, and co-host of the popular personal development podcast, High Vibin' It. So visit her at KelseyAida.com to learn how to manifest the life of your dreams. And welcome, Kelsey. I'm so excited to have you here and to talk about this topic.
Yes, I love our conversations. Thanks for having me back on. It's really fun to speak with someone who has that professional background, and you're a licensed therapist, and like I work with people and their emotions, but I'm not a licensed therapist, so I come from a different lens of like, here's how I've healed myself, this can work for you, and you come from the more clinical lens. So I love when we get together and discuss these things. It's so great.
I do too. So I want to start out with you just talking about the concept, your revolutionary next generation thinking about happiness. Give us some context about why that's important and where you're coming from.
Yeah. So where I'm coming from these days, especially, and our ideas are always changing and evolving. And I definitely used to subscribe to the whole, let's be positive all the time. Positive thinking is the only way. And it's not to say that positive thinking is not a helpful tool, one of many. And it's not to say that we can't have a goal to be happier and to feel more positive. But the problem with expecting yourself to feel good all the time, or to believe helpful things about yourself all the time, or to always be positive, is that we're humans and we don't always feel positive and we don't always feel good. And the trap of that is you expect yourself to be happy all the time, which is impossible. So you're already setting yourself up for failure. And then you judge yourself when you're not happy because you quote unquote should be more positive. So you're just putting judgment and guilt and shame on top of being a natural human and having fluctuation of emotions. And that's what actually causes you to be less happy in general. And honestly, you can be so much more happy and so much more free when you just stop judging how you feel, especially when how you feel doesn't always look like happiness. Because taking that label off of these emotions are good and these emotions are bad, that ultimately leads to more freedom. So my whole approach is to invite in more happiness, to cultivate it in a gentle and authentic way, and to not be pushy or forceful about it.
I love that. And a couple of things, have come to my mind while you're talking about how does the authentic happiness that you're talking about relate to evolution? Because you mentioned nowadays you're in this way of thinking, but you used to be in a different way of thinking. That's the first thing I wanted to comment on, because I feel like so many thought leaders get stuck in a way of thinking, and then they just keep promoting that way of thinking because it was popular. Mm-hmm. And don't allow themselves to keep looking at reality and taking the feedback of reality and saying, does this even make sense anymore? And that's one thing I really admire about you, Kelsey, is that you're willing to evolve as you evolve. And, I don't know, for me, I feel like that is a big element of happiness.
Yeah, letting yourself change.
Can you talk about that for a minute? how that relates to authentic happiness is the letting yourself change.
Yeah, that's a great point. And thanks for that awesome compliment, because I feel like personally, I try to teach as I'm evolving. So, of course, I have courses that I made years ago, or programs that I made years ago, or books I wrote years ago. And those lessons are still so valuable and perfect for somebody who's at that place in their journey. But then the more conscious I become, the more perspectives I take on. So it's like, okay, that was true. And also, this is true. And you just keep adding more and more and more and creating that and consciousness. And so, for me, I feel like when you can give yourself the permission to keep evolving and changing and expanding, and you don't put yourself in that box, then you don't get so uncomfortable when you're starting to outgrow the box. But let's say you're in a scenario where you're like, oh, this is my identity, this is who I have to be. But really, you're always changing and evolving. So when you can just go with that natural flow, of course, you're going to be more happy, because happiness is always a byproduct of usually going with the flow.
Yeah, I like that. And the feeling of liberation, don't you think has a lot to do with it? Again, going back to, authentic happiness, if you put yourself in the box of I have to always be positive, then you start feeling trapped. You're trapped in that paradigm of thought. Whereas if you're embracing evolution all the time, then it's like I'm free. I might be this way today, I might be that way tomorrow, but evolution, aligning with evolution is liberating.
Yeah, because I think anytime you start hearing yourself use the words never and always, you're putting yourself in a box and you're setting yourself up for restriction. But if you use the word sometimes or perhaps or, on occasion, that feels much more gentle and much more aligned than always and never. Because usually, like always and never, I notice those words come up a lot for me when I'm like in my anxiety, like a lot, like, oh, my life is always going to be the same, or things are never going to change. Like, that's just your anxiety talking. That's not like the truth of your life, because we're so dynamic and we're so multifaceted that nothing is always true and nothing is never true. There's so much gray and rainbow area that we don't even explore when we put ourselves in those boxes.
You mentioned a topic that is really often in my mind, and that's anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have struggled with anxiety I think my whole life. And I've got lots and lots of tools now to deal with it. But would you talk about that a little bit more, about how anxiety relates to happiness?
Yeah. So I found in my experience, especially recently, because I'm a hypersensitive person, I've tended to be on the anxious scale more often than not growing up. And the thing that's really helped me to embrace more happiness and joy and fulfillment is to make friends with my anxiety and get to know it better, and stop making it the enemy and stop labeling it as wrong or annoying or unwanted. And instead of suppressing and denying it, just seeing why is it there in the first place, and getting into these deep questions, and honestly having conversations with my anxiety as if my anxiety is like a person inside of me, and being like, hey, like, why are you here? Like, what are you trying to do for me? Like, what do you actually want? What do you need? How can I help you? And just opening up that dialogue and that conversation and befriending it has created so much peace for me, because even though the anxiety still comes up, I have the awareness to notice it and just be like, oh, that's just my anxiety trying to protect me again. Oh, that's just my anxiety trying to help me so I don't have to worry later in the future. Oh, that's just my anxiety trying to set me up for success. Like, it always has a positive intention for being there and what it's trying to do, even if the way that it's doing it could be maybe self-sabotaging, or like you could label it as dysfunctional or not helpful. The intention of that part of you is always pure and with love, because all the parts of you love you, even if you don't love all of them back. And so practicing that type of radical self-love and understanding and compassion for my anxiety makes it not really a problem for me as much anymore.
Well, two things I that come to mind. one is I really appreciate the thought that we can befriend all aspects of ourselves. Because again, it flies in the face of you can only befriend the quote unquote positive aspects of yourself. That is, again, is such a trap because everybody has resentment. Everybody manipulates other people sometimes. Everybody gets angry and wants to kill somebody sometimes. It's like we have all these different aspects of ourselves. And I also appreciate what you were saying about there is something positive we can get from understanding and interacting with that aspect of ourselves that we consider to be something negative that we'd like to get rid of. And I like that way of thinking about it, that there's something we can gain from interacting in that kind of neutral inquiry with that aspect. I'm not sure I align with the idea that all the aspects of myself have pure loving intentions toward me. I really don't believe that. I think I, as a whole being, can get something positive or beneficial from it. But I know there are times when my ego does not have a pure intention except to keep its domination over me. And so, I think we're going to agree to disagree on that. But
well, we could talk about it a little more and kind of explore, because I think that'd be a fun conversation. So, when I think of the purpose of the ego, like the ego's pure intention, or like bottom line intention is to like keep you alive. So the ego is more like the reptilian mind. Like usually in self-help, we think of the ego as like super annoying and like, we'll just get rid of that piece. But really, like if you didn't have an identity and you didn't have fears and you didn't have all things associated with ego, like you probably wouldn't live to be very long. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, so what's something that is beneficial from the ego? Like, what is it trying to help me to do? Well, it's just trying to help me to stay alive. Maybe it doesn't know the best way how in this 21st century because our brains haven't evolved as much as we think they have. But that would be like the pure positive intention from my perspective.
I got it. So you're not saying that it only has positive intentions, but you're saying there is some positive intention. Okay, I can totally.
Yeah. So I'm saying like if you look deep enough and you dig deep enough, you can usually find, I've noticed you always find some sort of positive intention, because even like think of an extreme example that seems like it doesn't have a positive intention, like self-sabotage. Right? So let's say someone's trying to go into a relationship and that's what they want and that's what they need and everything's going great and dandy, but then one aspect of themselves is like, no, and it sabotages the relationship, right? I think a lot of people can relate to this example. Well, why is that part sabotaging you? Probably because in the past relationship or relationships, you got so hurt that this part is now like a protector part, or it's trying to protect you in its mind. So it's like, okay, I can't let this happen because this could lead to pain. So yeah, it's sabotaging you in the 3D world, but really it's trying to protect you. So therefore it loves you.
Yeah. So I don't know if it loves me. I guess that again we could go into that whole idea of what is love. See, to me love is something that supports you to evolve no matter what its agenda is. If a person loves you, they support you to evolve even if they don't quote unquote like what you're doing. Right. I always think of the example of encouraging your partner to go to AA or some 12-step program to get sober, even though they're going every night of the week and you don't see them. Yeah. It's that to me is love. So the ego, sometimes, there is a part, I understand totally what you're saying about they want to protect, the ego wants to protect you. The irony of it is that just exactly what you said earlier, that it may not know the best way.
Right.
It's very primitive thinking. And so it thinks it's trying to protect you, but it really isn't protecting you at all.
Right.
It's a very complicated dynamic that I don't know. I don't even think it would benefit us to go any deeper into that at this point, because I think it's more helpful to do what you're suggesting, of realize that all the aspects of us have many different motives. But if we look for the neutral way of looking at it, with love infused into that way, then we can find the benefit of it. And that's what helps us.
Yeah, going in with compassionate inquiry and assuming that there's a valid reason why this part of me is doing this thing. Even if this thing is hurting me, even if this thing is detrimental, there's a reason why it's happening. And once you get to that reason, it just makes so much more sense and you can have so much more inner peace. Because why we don't feel peace is because we have these parts of us inside that are battling it out. We say this part of me is cool, but this part is not. I'll claim this as a part of me, but this one can go in the garbage. Like, you can't throw away parts of yourself. It just doesn't work. And you can't make parts of you the enemy either, because that doesn't work. So the only thing left is to try and understand deeper and find appreciation for what it's attempting to do, which usually is something helpful, even if it doesn't know how, because not all the parts of us are that conscious or that aware of the detrimental things that they could be doing to us while they're trying to help us with some other thing, you know?
So, you know what I love too about that description of what's going on, Kelsey, is whether you're talking about the aspects of your inner self or whether we're talking about the oneness in the world. You know, the different parts of humanity, the Democrats and the Republicans. It's like, it does not help to just keep fighting. We have to come together at some point and listen. Just what you said, compassionate inquiry. Why do the Republicans believe what they believe? Why do the Democrats believe what they believe? Why do the Israelis and the Middle Easterners? It's like everybody can do what we get to do on the inside. We could change the world, but it starts with your insides.
Yeah, it's so true. And that's the whole thing about the law of attraction. What's happening on a societal stage is just a mirror of what's happening inside of everyone individually. Maybe not like everyone individually all the time, but to some degree, like, we all have our inner battles, you know, we're not hearing each other out on the inside, like these different parts of us. We're saying this part's bad, this part's good, this part's right, this part's wrong. And so, of course, it's being displayed in a really extreme way right now, because that's what the universe does. It's like, okay, if you're not going to look inside, we're going to show you in your life exactly what's happening until you're forced to like face it and do something about it if you don't like it, because it's usually not your fault. But if you want to feel better, it's definitely your responsibility to start doing the inner work and take a look in the mirror, you know, and doing this type of work. And this is why I love when people go to therapy and just ask questions about themselves and get to know themselves better, is because when you can create a better relationship with yourself and all the parts of you, it's so easy to do that in real life, and it's going to translate, which is why they always say like inner peace is world peace, you know?
Very good. I completely concur. So let's get back to the happiness part.
Yeah.
Talk about how your belief system at this evolutionary moment deals with challenges like the pandemic, for instance. You know, how can you face the reality about the pandemic, not be in denial, not, you know, and still find happiness in this situation?
Mm-hmm. Well, one, I personally don't place the expectation on myself anymore that I need to be happy all the time, which gives me a lot of freedom and a lot of wiggle room. I would say in my life personally, like probably 85 or more % of the time, I feel really good and happy. But when I don't, I can feel really stressed. I can feel really hopeless. I can feel in despair. I can feel, if the news is on too much in my house, because my boyfriend loves political theater, like I'll just start to feel like so heavy and like annoyed of like the state of affairs in the world. And for me, just giving myself the grace to be human and feel those things and go through them, I find that I process them pretty quickly because I don't say, oh, I shouldn't be feeling upset. I shouldn't be feeling mad. I shouldn't be feeling angry. I just say, you know what? These are crazy times. Anyone would feel upset right now, and that's okay. And I just let myself be upset for like 5, 10, 20 minutes, and then it subsides naturally. Like, that's the beauty of processing your emotions, is I find that you always come back to a more neutral, enjoyable, relaxed state of like relief and like contentment when you're really good at processing emotions that are not that.
What about when you feel stuck in that painful emotion? Are there particular actions or thoughts or behaviors that you engage in to help you keep processing or shifting out of that?
Yeah, for me personally, if I feel stuck, I will get together with one of my coaches who can kind of point out my blind spots to me, and give me new perspectives and just hold space for me while I process that emotion. But usually when I feel stuck, I just lean into it more and then it gets unstuck, because I feel like what makes us stuck is when we're like not really willing to go all the way there emotionally, which is understandable because it can be scary until you've practiced it a lot. But what you'll find is usually when you open yourself to the emotion, you don't get stuck. It's when you don't open yourself to the emotion that you get more stuck, if that makes sense.
It makes sense to me, is that,
Yeah.
well, and that saying comes to mind, what you resist persists.
Right. Yeah, that's basically what I'm saying.
Okay. I'd still like to get some more steps or deeper discussion on this, because I feel like this really trips people up, is the difficulty, because you and I have lots of experience embracing our emotions and allowing ourselves to go deeper. And not everybody has a coach, but number one, I want to completely encourage that, because what you're really saying is get support.
Yeah.
Get support if you feel stuck.
Mm-hmm.
What else can people do besides getting support? And, if they're still struggling to go deeper with their emotions, what else can they do?
My really simple and like practical answer to this is to make it okay in your mind. So my new mantra is like, something is going on and that's okay. Like, I'm feeling stressed and that's okay. Like, I'm just normalizing everything. Like, right now I'm feeling a little sad and that's okay. Right now I'm feeling stuck and that's okay. Right now I don't know what to do and that's okay. And when you can stop labeling being stuck as wrong, it might still be unwanted. Like, you don't have to prefer to be stuck, but when you can stop labeling these ebbs and flows of life as right and wrong, you have so much less resistance to them and they flow much more naturally. And honestly, I feel like if someone is stuck, there's probably a good reason why, and it might be beneficial to them even though they don't realize. Like, maybe you're not supposed to know the next step yet. Maybe you're not supposed to try and make a plan when you don't have clarity. Usually stuckness is trying to get you to be with yourself and just be still. Like, when you're stuck, I feel like it's really beneficial to just be still, because that's what it needs. Like, stuckness just needs to not move for a little, and then it will move again naturally.
It's so interesting, Kelsey, the idea that because those are two words for the same thing, stuck and still, or you can use either word to describe a state of being.
Right. And think of the connotation. Stuck has a really bad connotation and still has a really good connotation of like gurus and enlightenment and spirituality and presence. So it's just two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, I love that. Stuck and still. I really, really love that, because it does help us to just zoom out a little bit from our, incessant judgment and criticism of ourselves, to just zoom out a little bit. And, if we wanted to, I'm sure we could go through all of our quote unquote negative judgments about particular ways that we feel, and we could find the other way of describing it. I'm thinking of anger, for instance. If I feel angry, what is a neutral way of describing that? Maybe I feel
passionate.
I feel passionate, or maybe I feel a distance between me and them, or between me and that action, or I feel unaligned with that, whatever that is. However, whatever word you want to use for it, if you can get to that place of describing it neutrally, then maybe it'll give us a clue about what's going on. I really think that's a fantastic tool.
Yeah. And here's the big picture thing, tying it all back to happiness, is like the less you can judge your experience and yourself and your life, the more happy you're going to be. Like, subtracting judgment adds happiness. It's just a natural byproduct of releasing the judgment and not putting so much pressure on yourself to feel a certain way all the time. And I feel like happiness and joy are something that arise naturally from within when we're not constantly judging ourselves in our life, and we're giving ourselves permission to feel those alongside of whatever else we're feeling. So for example, during this craziness of 2020, there's a lot of things to be sad about. There's a lot of things to be upset about, stressed out about, disappointed about. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you have to deny yourself fun, play, joy, things that you enjoy doing. And I would argue that now more than ever, it's good to give yourself some time and space to be in those emotional states, and to watch that comedy, and to read that funny book, and to laugh with your girlfriends, or whatever it is that helps like give you joy, because you got to have some balance.
Yeah, I really like that, because, I think there's so many things to say about that, but we tend to feel like if we are enjoying ourselves, if we are some of the lucky people who are not losing our homes, or even if you are, you still have, a right or a responsibility to enjoy what you can. But especially if you're not suffering that much during this time, I think we have a tendency to feel like we should be suffering, because so many, if you're a good person, you should be miserable because of all these people suffering. And yet, again, it goes back to what you were saying, is that, you can hold all parts of yourself in equal respect, that you can respect the reality that there's a lot of pain in the world, and there's still a lot of joy in the world. And those are not mutually exclusive.
Right. You don't have to deny one in order to have the other. You can have it all, which is ultimately the human experience. And like, I feel like that's what we came here to do. You didn't just come here to be miserable all the time, but you also didn't just come here for everything to be handy dandy easy all the time either. Like, there's a mix. That's just life, and that's what makes it beautiful, because I always say, like, without the contrast, you wouldn't even be able to know what happiness is. Because like, if you had never experienced degrees of sadness and happiness, how are you supposed to know what happiness is if you're happy all the time? That would just be like a normal emotion for you. But when you've been sad and then you're happy and you feel better, that contrast is what gives you the context of like, whoa, I feel so much better. This is awesome, So you can't only just have one. And there's value in the feeling bad states too, because they make you appreciate the feeling good ones even more, and they give context for you to realize that it's different and more preferred.
Well, and it's, a friend of mine describes the energy of the universe as, there's the energy of connection, and there's the energy of separation. Mm-hmm. There's the energy of sexuality, which is connecting on any level, and the energy of violence, which is separating, to any degree. And it's like it's just it's the natural way of the universe. I mean, the whole Big Bang, it's the energy of contraction, it's the energy of expansion. There is that duality that is all part of the oneness, and it gets to be honored. I wanted to comment on one more thing, and that is we were raised in societies that controlled us through shame. And it's not your fault that you tend to criticize yourself, because that's how you were raised. Oh, that's bad. You're being selfish. You should share your toy with Johnny, rather than saying it's perfectly natural that you don't want to share your toy with Johnny.
Right.
But let's talk about that for a minute and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, no, you're shamed into it, because it's like, that's a fast way to get you to behave the way I want you to. You're being a bad girl. You're noisy in the restaurant, or whatever it is. And so it's perfectly natural that we learned to shame ourselves. You shouldn't be feeling that way. It's not good. And I just wanted to say that, because even the tendency to do it, we can shame ourselves for.
Right.
So I just want to say, let's just eliminate all the shame. But we learned that without shame, you're never going to change. You know?
Yeah, we use it as a means of motivation.
Exactly. But it's so ridiculous. You know, like fat shaming people. It's like, you know, you're fat, you're hideous looking, you know, and that's of course going to make me want to just eat more. Whereas it's like, you know, you're lovable however you are, and, you know, allow yourself to go through the process and trust that eventually, like I did, you know, in the last year, I said, I'm going to use this pandemic really well. And I've lost 82 pounds since the pandemic started, and jogging and working out with a personal trainer. That didn't come from shame. That came from allowance.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said about allowing, you know, and the whole purpose of my new book really is to help you to allow more happiness to rise from within, to help you to allow yourself to feel better, to help you to encourage to give yourself permission. Because like how you said, people who maybe aren't suffering to a certain really bad degree are like, well, I still need to be suffering because everybody else is. That's like saying my husband broke his shin, so I should break my shin too. Like, does that help anybody? It doesn't, because then if my shin's broken, how am I supposed to help him up the stairs?
That's so true. So since you mentioned your book, please tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's called Affirmations for Happiness, and it basically has 200 affirmations, or sometimes I also call them like thought patterns or beneficial perspectives, to just help you to see that like it's okay to feel happy even if your life isn't perfect. It's okay to have more fun today, like little ways to let more joy and happiness in. And also some of the affirmations are like really profound, and I would say more deep ways to start feeling better on a more holistic basis. And I definitely made it a point to include some affirmations about like all emotions are valuable. Like it's okay to feel however I feel. Like I'm releasing judgment from myself now, because all of those practices lead to more happiness. So even if every single affirmation in the book doesn't have the word happiness in it, they're like ingeniously designed to help you to cultivate more happiness over time by releasing judgment, doing things that help you to feel good, embracing connection in your life, all the things that I found that help people to feel better. And I think it's just timely that it's being released in this year, because it's been so heavy and so hard. And I think it's just important not to lose sight of like, you're allowed to be happy too.
That's so great. How could people get the book?
Yeah, so it's already available for pre-sale depending on when this episode is going to come out. And then November 24th, it'll be available to like go get it in stores and everywhere. But I will give you the link so you can put it in the show notes. And if you just Google Affirmations for Happiness, Kelsey Aida, I think it pops right up too.
That's awesome. This will be released on the 26th of October.
Oh, perfect. So a month before. So yeah, once you listen to this, you can totally go and pre-order a copy. And I will definitely say that it makes a great holiday gift, no matter what holiday you celebrate. It's a cute little stocking stuffer. It's kind of a smaller book. So if you like little daily books of inspiration, then this is the book for you.
I really love that. I cannot wait to get a copy of Affirmations for Happiness. And it's something, who can't use that?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing I want to say too is the title seems like, oh, it's that old way of positive thinking because it's affirmations that are positive and there's 200 of them and they're all about happiness. But really, my approach is, I like to think, is so much more authentic and gentle, where I help you to feel better by moving towards relief. You know, like you don't have to fake it till you make it. That's the old way of using affirmations. That's why they probably haven't worked for you in the past. But they are really beneficial tools when you know how to use them in a really authentic way. So my first book is all about using affirmations in an authentic way. And this book is just an extension of that, except it's tailored to the topic of happiness and enjoyment.
That's fantastic. Again, it's such a new way of thinking about how to be happy. And it reminds me of the Dalai Lama and the book, The Art of Happiness. You know, certainly it's, I can't remember exactly how the Buddhists say it, but it's something like, life is painful, but you don't have to suffer.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of the energy that I feel about your book, is that it acknowledges that life is painful. You don't have to pretend like it isn't. You know, a woman that I know was talking, you know, on her Facebook posts about, you know, I'm powerful, I'm a queen, I'm a winner, you know, and it's like all of these, those to me are affirmations that fly against how you feel at times. And it inevitably makes you feel, like you said, makes you feel bad because you know there is an element of untruth to it.
Right, because the affirmation, based on how potent it's going to be for you, really depends on like the emotional state that you're in. And like, I recognize that people who want to buy a book called Affirmations for Happiness might not always feel happy. Otherwise, you're probably not reading books about happiness, right? You're more in like a search for it. So a lot of the affirmations are more gentle, like I'm open to receiving more happiness in my life, and I'm working towards finding out what makes me happy. And they're just more gentle, easy ways to move you in the right direction of what you're wanting, as opposed to, I'm so happy all the time, I'm always positive, my life is perfect. Those ones can feel great if you're already in that state, you know, but for most people, they're just like, what? This is so fraudulent.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying in a different way too, because it's like you're aligning with reality. How can you be happy and be aligned with reality at the same time? And that to me is the undercurrent or the foundation of your philosophy, is let's acknowledge reality and find ways to deal with it in the most optimal way.
Yeah, and I'm not even encouraging people or trying to teach people that you should want to feel happier, or that you need to be more happy more of the time, or that happiness is better than any other emotion. I just know from experience, I prefer to feel happier more of the time. I know other people have a preference to feel better more of the time. So I've found things that are really helpful. And so I like to write them in books.
Well, I love it. And I love the journey that you're on. I love keeping up with you. And, you know, I really want to encourage people to find the book, Affirmations for Happiness. How else can people connect with you, Kelsey?
Yeah, well, basically everything that I'm all about can be found on my website and blog, which is kelseyaida.com. Also, if you like listening to me talk about stuff, I have my own podcast with my friend Lindsay Robinson, who's a hypnotherapist. And Helen, we actually need to get you on the show. I've been meaning to ask you about this. But it's called High Vibing It. So go check our show out. It's really fun. And yeah, I'm always on Instagram at Kelsey Aida. And those are most of the ways that you can find me.
And do you have any events? You were mentioning international retreats. Do you have any events planned?
Yeah, so I'm actually hosting my second annual Radical Self-Love Retreat in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, which is happening in January of next year, so not too far away. And it's kind of like a lot of the parts work that we were discussing earlier about getting to know these different aspects of yourself and coming to see their intentions and coming to understand more of yourself. A lot of that type of work we'll be doing at the retreat.
This is January 2021.
2021. Mm-hmm.
So like, two and a half months.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, there is a backup date in case anything weird happens with COVID, but so far it's been fine. Like my boyfriend just went to Cabo and came back and he said it was no problem. It's going to be a small group too. So
that's awesome. So guys, if you want to have a personal, in-depth experience of how to develop this ability to accept all these parts of yourself that you've been in conflict with, contact Kelsey, and I think it's going to be fantastic. So thank you so much for being on my show today and for all the work you do, Kelsey. I mean, you are an inspiration, and I really appreciate your devotion to consciousness and how you share that with the world. And I will stay in touch, and we'll have you on again in your next iteration of Kelsey Aida.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was so great, and I really appreciate you too. And I'm going to have you on High Vibe, so look out for that email.
I would love to do it. Okay, bye guys.